on that basis, can I call on Senator Fintan Warfield?
Here, look. I understand that a mechanism was meant to be in place between the Department of Media and RTE for oversight. This was raised in the Dáil today, that there were meant to be monthly meetings between the Department to the Media, the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform and RTE in relation to finance and accounts. So was that structure in place? Can anyone tell me?
Perhaps answered that during during my tenure. That was in place. I don't recall when it started, but we met. I couldn't swear it was monthly, but we met quite regularly with the department and the officials to talk about a number of matters.
Okay, appreciate that, Breda.
Just update on that then. So that has continued. There's meetings, I would say, roughly every 2 months, maybe 6 weeks every 2 months, and between us and the department, and also New Era generally attend them as well.
Okay. In the opening statement, Ms. Nuradic, you say about how you're deeply unhappy about the evident pattern of inconsistency and lack of completeness in the provision of information to date by the Executive. I have to say, before your time, that RTE at the Public Accounts Committee on 5 occasions when it came to bogus self-employment seemed to mislead the committee at the Public Accounts Committee. So I think it's time for our public sector broadcaster to hold its hands up and to say that the time of bogus self-employment is over. You know, I wonder how the people feel who are on these contracts, how they feel in terms of when they see other special deals happening. But so I'm wondering about, again, I raised this the other day, how many workers are involved in the investigation in terms of the Department of Social Protection's investigation, which is significant, into RTE. How many workers are involved? How many examinations have concluded? And in terms of maybe a question for the CFO, how much contingent liability have RTE provided for money that might be owed to revenue?
I can provide the detail actually brought it with me just around the number of investigations where they are. So before you hand to the CFO regarding the provision. Just for clarity, the Department of Social Protection are currently carrying out an investigation in respect of the status of RT staff for PRSI insurability. The department have indicated that they intend to investigate over 500 individuals who have provide service to RT on a contractor basis. This process began in October 2020 and is likely to continue beyond 2023. Summary of investigations to date. So total in progress completed 134, decisions received 112, Class A PRSI 77, Class S PRSI 35, outstanding awaiting decisions 22, closed and PRSI paid 38, appeals lodged 44, appeals withdrawn 12, appeals active 31, appeals closed 1, appeals heard 5, appeals upheld 1, appeals unsuccessful 2, appeals outcome unknown 2, High Court appeal 1. RT are in appealing decisions where there are factual inaccuracies and or where there are issues of legal interpretation. And we're very happy to furnish you with that information. Yeah.
In terms of the contingent liability that RT may have for those 500, I think what 60% of the examinations by the state have resulted in decisions. Well, that was as of last year, but what kind of contingency liability have RTE in place? Have you provided for money that might be owed to revenue?
Yeah, we have a provision in place, and it's a sizable provision. The provision is based on the knowledge we know and how these decisions have gone so far. The provision was one of the main areas in the audit, the most recent audit with Deloitte's, and they've thoroughly been through it, and a lot of time is spent on it, on its adequacy.
Have you a ballpark figure?
I think that's commercially sensitive. I would consider that commercially sensitive.
Yeah, it's just...
Sorry, can I just go back over that, Mr. Collins, because I'm really hesitant to accept the line of anything being commercially sensitive at this point in time. Just repeat that, why it's commercially sensitive.
Well, I think normally companies don't reveal what provisions they have in their accounts. This expenditure hasn't been incurred yet. This is what we based on our assumptions and the view we've taken on things, what might actually happen. But this hasn't occurred yet.
Yeah.
So I think it's it's one thing if we had settled a certain amount, happy to give those figures, but this hasn't happened yet. This is something that's going to happen over the next potentially 5 years.
If it was 10 or if it was 10 million or 20 million or
Yeah.
30 million, it's something that could bankrupt the organisation.
Just to explain in terms of the legal advice around this, we can't prejudice any kind of outcomes, but the process is ongoing. We're fully cooperating with Scope. There's 500 individuals, and we were very happy to supply information in terms of an update to you on a regular basis. Yeah?
Can I ask, Breda, just in terms of credit, in the Grant Thornton report in section 1.12b, it says that RTE raised the credit in July 2020 of 75,000 with the commercial brand, we know them to be Renault, on their airtime spend. So in effect, RTE funded the 75,000 payment to Talent, whom we know to be Mr. Tubridy. So as I understand that, that's a voucher for revenue for ads that they could use at a later date. In the document published by RTE recently on June 22nd, it shows that Mr. Tubridy's published earnings versus his actual earnings. And I'd just like to query the year 2020. You weren't in, yeah.
And yes, that I wasn't in RTE in July 2020. And neither do I have access to the Grant Thornton report,
Okay.
nor was I responsible for the earnings. So just to clarify that, the earnings disclosure.
I appreciate that. Perhaps someone else might be able to mention, just give me an insight into or clarity on the year 2020, because the other years are €75,000, but 2020 is €56,000, which Renault would have given to Mr. Tubridy. I'd like to know, it's a question for RTE, did Renault get a full credit of 75,000 in 2020, as they did in 2021 and 2022?
If I can help to clarify that, Senator. Renault were only involved in the year 2020, and that was the year in which they got the credit note. The credit note was against their sponsorship because they were coming to the end, coming to the end of year 2 of a three-year sponsorship contract for the Late Late. They had already paid in full for year 2. So the credit note, which I asked to raise internally through my commercial manager and notified the CFO, was against the sponsorship income, and the credit note was raised in July 2020.
So why is it lower in 2020?
The credit note was definitely raised for €75,000.
In 2020?
The 50, are you asking about the 56?
I'm asking about the 56. It just seems different to the others.
Yeah,
so.
it's just the phasing of a year. His contract ran from April to March, so it was 9 months of a year was put into that year.
Okay.
Sorry, Deputy. Just to say, I mean, in terms of the 3 payments and what you're asking there in a way, you know, this is all about the payments being made directly to Ryan Tubridy and why they were not declared as part of their earnings. So the exact point in time where a credit note was provided to Renault, at that point in time, RTE were paying Ryan Tubridy, and that should have been declared. When RTE paid Ryan Tubridy from the barter account on 2 occasions, that should have been declared. So when you drill down into all of this, that is, you know, in terms of the published figures, they are the 3 issues. That at the moment that credit note was issued, RTE were paying Ryan Tubridy and not declaring it. And at the moment we paid from the barter account, RTE were paying Ryan Tubridy and not declaring it.
My final question, and I've only 30 seconds. You know, I called for the publication of the 100 top earners across the organisation, and not just on-air presenters last week. So I welcome the publication of that. Would you consider publishing the bottom 20 or bottom 50 earners across the organisation, anonymised, of course, in order to understand the pay differential and the culture in the organisation? Oireachtas Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Warfield.